Hi, Guy. Tonight we journey to the heart of Goseon, where the moon paints the stepping stones across the river with an ethereal glow. You're going to see something truly special tonight, a glimpse into a world both ancient and beautiful. Imagine, if you will, the tranquility of a moonlit night, the gentle rush of water, and the soft glow reflecting off the tiled roofs of traditional Korean houses. You probably won't survive the cuteness overload of traditional Hanok villages under the moonlight. Just kidding, mostly. Okay, maybe a little bit. These villages, with their curved roofs and intricate wooden details, are incredibly charming, especially bathed in the soft light of the moon. I've got some stunning visuals lined up for you tonight, so prepare to be amazed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support really helps me keep creating these journeys for you, and of course, it lets me know what kind of content you're enjoying the most. Hit that notification bell too, so you don't miss out on future explorations. Tell me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm always curious. It's amazing to think of all the different places these videos reach. And I love connecting with viewers from all around the globe. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's create a little community here. Who knows? Maybe you'll even find someone watching from just down the street. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the cool night air. The distant chirp of crickets. Can you feel it? Good. Now, open your eyes and let's step back in time. You trudge along a stepping stone path, the shallow river gurgling beneath your feet. It's the Joseon period, and life is, well, simpler, but definitely not easy. Imagine the feel of the cool, smooth stones beneath your worn sandals. The moon casts long shadows that dance and sway with each step you take. The air is filled with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the damp earth. You're probably heading home after a long day, maybe carrying a bundle of firewood or a basket of freshly picked vegetables. Life in Joseon was a blend of hard work and quiet beauty. Days were long, filled with the rhythms of agriculture and traditional crafts, but there was a deep connection to nature and a strong sense of community. Fact: Joseon was known for its beautiful gardens and intricate landscaping, often featuring stepping stone paths over water. These weren't just practical ways to cross a stream or pond. They were carefully designed elements within larger landscapes. Think of them as living works of art, blending seamlessly with the surrounding environment. The placement of the stones, the types of plants used, and the way the water flowed. All of these details contributed to the overall aesthetic and philosophical meaning of the garden. We'll be looking at some examples of these beautiful gardens throughout tonight's video. Quirky tidbit: some stepping stones were intentionally placed unevenly to encourage mindfulness and prevent rushing. Historians still argue whether this was practical or just made people grumpy. Imagine walking along, lost in thought, and suddenly, whoops! A slightly higher or lower stone jolts you back to the present moment. Was it a deliberate design choice to promote mindfulness and a slower pace of life? Or was it simply a practical matter of using whatever stones were available? Some historians believe it was the former, arguing that it reflected the Confucian emphasis on self-cultivation and contemplation. Others believe it was simply a matter of practicality. It's a fun little debate, and honestly, we may never know the definitive answer. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Open debate. Scholars still debate the extent to which stepping stone paths were symbolic of journeys and transitions in Joseon culture. Think about it. The act of crossing a stream, one careful step at a time, could be seen as a metaphor for navigating the challenges and changes of life. Each stone represents a decision, a moment of reflection, a step forward on the path. Some scholars believe these paths held deep symbolic meaning, representing not just physical journeys, but also spiritual and emotional ones. They see the stones as representing stages of life, challenges overcome, and the constant flow of time. Others argue that while the aesthetic and practical aspects are clear, the symbolic interpretations might be reading too much into a simple architectural feature. It's a fascinating debate, and it speaks to the richness and complexity of Joseon culture. What are your thoughts? Were these paths simply practical, or did they hold a deeper meaning? Let's discuss it in the comments. Now, let's continue our journey along this moonlit path. Imagine the sounds of the night around you, the gentle rustling of leaves, the distant call of an owl, and the soft gurgle of the water beneath your feet. Let's explore further into this beautiful and mysterious world of Joseon. The air hung thick and heavy, a cloying sweetness clinging to the humid night. It was the unmistakable aroma of fermenting rice, a scent that drew me closer, like a moth to a flickering lantern. I found the source nestled between two ramshackle buildings, a low, earthen cellar with a half-open wooden door. From within, a low humming drifted out, punctuated by the rhythmic sloshing of liquid. I peered inside. The cellar was cool and dim, a welcome respite from the sticky heat. Clay jars of varying sizes lined the walls, some sealed with cloth, others open, their contents bubbling gently. A man, his face flushed and jovial, stood in the center, stirring a large wooden vat with a long paddle. He hummed a cheerful tune, seemingly oblivious to my presence. "Good evening," I ventured, stepping inside. The man startled slightly, then broke into a wide, welcoming grin. "Ah, a visitor! Welcome, welcome! Come in, come in!" "Don't mind the mess." He gestured around the cellar with a flourish, seemingly unconcerned by the earthen floor, the overflowing jars, or the general air of controlled chaos. "Park," he introduced himself, extending a hand sticky with rice residue. "Park the brewer. And you are?" I introduced myself, explaining I was simply passing through. "Passing through, E.H.? Well, you've picked a fine place to stop. Nothing like a good cup of Makgeolli on a hot night, E.H." He winked, dipping a small ladle into the vat and offering it to me. The Makgeolli was milky white, slightly effervescent, with a subtle sweetness that danced on my tongue. It was cool and refreshing, washing away the lingering heat of the night. "This is excellent," I complimented. "You have a real talent, Mr. Park." Park beamed. It's nothing special. Just a little something I learned from my father, and his father before him. It's an old family recipe, passed down through generations." He leaned in conspiratorially, lowering his voice. "Though," he added with a twinkle in his eye, "I've made a few adjustments over the years. A little secret ingredient here and there." I looked around the cellar, at the jars overflowing with fermenting rice, the shelves lined with dried herbs and flowers. I could imagine Park experimenting with different flavors, adding a sprig of mint here, a handful of chrysanthemum petals there, striving to create the perfect brew. It struck me suddenly how idyllic this life seemed, tucked away in this cool, earthy cellar, creating something with his own hands. A simple life, free from the complexities and anxieties of the outside world. Then, I caught a glimpse of something scurrying in the shadows. A rat. And another. And suddenly the romantic image shattered. I remembered stories of exploding clay jars, the constant battle against pests, the long hours spent hunched over the fermenting vats. Perhaps this life wasn't quite as idyllic as it appeared. Park, seemingly oblivious to my internal musings, continued to extol the virtues of his Makgeolli. "You know," he said, ladling himself a generous portion, "Makgeolli has been a favorite in Joseon for centuries. Everyone drank it, from the king on down to the lowliest peasant. A true drink of the people, E.H.? He wasn't wrong. Makgeolli, in its various forms, had been a staple beverage throughout the Joseon dynasty. A milky, slightly sweet, low-alcohol rice wine, it was readily available and relatively inexpensive, making it a popular choice across all social classes. Of course," Park continued, his voice taking on a more academic tone, "the exact recipes and brewing methods varied from region to region. Some added ginseng, others ginger. Some even used flowers, like azaleas or chrysanthemums. For flavor, they claimed, or for medicinal properties." He winked again. "Or perhaps to mask a slightly off batch." He chuckled, taking another swig of his Makgeolli. "The historians still argue about it, you know. They pore over old texts, trying to decipher the ancient recipes to recreate the authentic Joseon Makgeolli. But I tell you," he tapped his chest with his sticky finger, "the real secret is here," he said, tapping his chest. "In the heart of the brewer." He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. And in that moment, despite the rats and the potential for exploding jars, I envied him. He had found something he loved, something he was good at, and he pursued it with passion and a healthy dose of humor. It was a simple life, perhaps, but it was his life. He refilled my ladle, the milky liquid swirling gently. "Another cup?" he offered. I hesitated for a moment, the image of the scurrying rats flashing through my mind. But then I looked at Park, at his cheerful face and the genuine warmth in his eyes, and I smiled. "Don't mind if I do," I said, raising the ladle to my lips. The sweet, fermented scent filled my nostrils, and I took a long, slow sip, savoring the cool, refreshing taste of history. The rats, the exploding jars, the scholarly debates, it all faded away, leaving only the simple pleasure of a good drink, shared with a jovial brewer on a humid night. The path, worn smooth by countless feet over countless years, wound its way through the whispering bamboo. The moon, a sliver of polished silver in the inky sky, offered little illumination, leaving much to the imagination and the heightened senses of the night. The air, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, clung to you like a second skin. Then, cutting through the stillness, came a sound deep, resonant, and somehow comforting. The tone of a temple bell echoing across the valley, each reverberation a gentle caress against the quiet of the night. It was a sound that spoke of order, of routine, of a rhythm to life that felt strangely alien in this world of shadows and uncertainty, a world that, let's be honest, had been distinctly lacking in both lately. The sound drew you forward, a beacon in the darkness. The path, now becoming steeper, led upwards, the bamboo giving way to ancient pines that clawed at the star-dusted sky. Finally, cresting a small rise, you saw it. A wooden pavilion, bathed in the soft glow of lanterns, perched precariously on the edge of a cliff overlooking the churning river below. Within the pavilion, silhouetted against the lantern light, hung the source of the mesmerizing sound, a magnificent bronze bell, its surface gleaming faintly in the moonlight. You paused, captivated by the scene. The bell, still humming softly from its recent ringing, seemed to pulse with a life of its own. You imagined the person who rang it, their hands wrapped around the thick wooden beam used to strike the bronze. What was their life like? Peaceful, probably. Ordered. Certainly a far cry from the chaotic scramble for survival that had become your daily routine. A pang of longing, sharp and unexpected, pierced through you. You envied the imagined tranquility of the bell ringer, their life seemingly governed by the steady rhythm of the bronze giant. Temple bells like this, you knew, weren't just beautiful objects. They played a central role in Joseon society, marking the passage of time, signaling the start and end of the workday, and announcing important rituals and ceremonies. They were the heartbeat of the community, a constant reminder of the cyclical nature of life, the ebb and flow of days and seasons. They were a thread connecting the past to the present, a tangible link to generations who had lived and worshipped under the same sonorous tones. You circled the pavilion, studying the intricate carvings that adorned its wooden supports. Dragons and phoenixes intertwined in an elaborate dance, their mythical forms imbued with a sense of power and grace. The bell itself, you noticed upon closer inspection, was not simply a smooth, cast surface. Delicate patterns, almost invisible in the dim light, spiraled around its circumference. These weren't just decorative flourishes. Some bells, you recalled, were cast with specific designs or inscriptions, believed to enhance the bell's sound, imbuing it with spiritual properties, warding off evil spirits, or even influencing the weather. You wondered what secrets this particular bell held, what stories it could tell if only it could speak. The thought of the bell's creation sparked another memory, one gleaned from dusty scrolls and whispered conversations with scholars. The exact metallurgical techniques and alloy compositions used by Joseon bell makers were, and still are, a subject of much debate. Some argued that the bell's unique resonance came from the precise ratio of copper and tin. Others pointed to the addition of trace elements like zinc or silver. Still others believed the secret lay in the casting process itself, the careful control of temperature, and the precise moment the molten metal was poured into the mold. There were whispers, too, of secret rituals performed during the casting, of prayers chanted and offerings made to appease the spirits and ensure a flawless bell. The river below rushed onward, its ceaseless flow, a stark contrast to the stillness of the pavilion. The wind rustled through the pines, carrying with it the faint scent of incense, perhaps from a nearby temple. The bell, now silent, loomed large in the darkness, a silent sentinel watching over the valley. You knew you couldn't stay here forever. Your journey, however uncertain its destination, beckoned. But as you turned to leave, the image of the bell, its resonant song echoing in your memory, remained. It was a reminder, however fleeting, of a world beyond the shadows, a world of order and beauty, a world you hoped, one day, to find again. And, let's be honest, maybe a world where you could get a decent night's sleep without worrying about being ambushed by bandits or falling off a cliff. For now, though, the path called, and you had miles to go before you could rest. Suddenly, the night sky erupted. One moment, a canvas of deep indigo sprinkled with the faint dust of stars. The next, a blinding flash of lightning split the darkness, leaving a searing afterimage burned onto my retinas. The air crackled with static, a tangible energy that prickled the hairs on my arms. Even the once gentle river, which had been murmuring its sleepy song just moments before, seemed to hold its breath, its surface momentarily stilled, as if in awe of the sudden display of power. Wow, nature's having a moment, I thought, a slightly nervous chuckle catching in my throat. Then I saw it. Across the river, nestled amongst the trees, the Temple Bell Pavilion was engulfed in flames. The vibrant orange glow stood in stark contrast to the brief, ethereal white of the lightning, painting a horrifyingly beautiful picture against the backdrop of the night. The wooden structure burned quickly, the dry, aged wood crackling and spitting fiercely as the flames licked at its intricate carvings. Thick plumes of smoke billowed skyward, twisting and writhing like angry spirits released from their earthly prison. I watched, mesmerized and horrified, the flickering light playing across my face, highlighting the growing unease within me. My stomach lurched. Was anyone inside? I hoped not. I desperately hoped not. But realistically, fire safety wasn't exactly a priority back then, was it? I imagined someone, a lone monk perhaps, caught unaware by the sudden storm, seeking shelter within the pavilion just moments before the lightning struck. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, colder than the night air. I knew there was nothing I could do, separated from the temple by the swiftly flowing river and the sheer speed at which the fire spread. All I could do was watch, a helpless witness to the destruction unfolding before me. It's a strange thing, lightning. Such raw, untamed power contained within a fleeting moment. I'd read that lightning strikes were a relatively common occurrence in Joseon, especially during the hot, humid summer months like these. The combination of the mountainous terrain and the seasonal monsoons created the perfect conditions for electrical storms, turning the sky into a volatile battleground between the heavens and the earth. It made sense, I supposed, considering the frequency with which I'd seen storms gather and dissipate during my time here. But witnessing the destructive power firsthand, seeing a familiar landmark reduced to a blazing inferno in a matter of minutes, brought the reality of it home in a way that simply reading about it never could. The incident also brought to mind some of the more quirky beliefs surrounding lightning in this era. Some people genuinely believed that lightning strikes were signs of divine displeasure. Had the monks somehow angered the heavens? Or perhaps a specific individual had earned the wrath of the gods? It was a sobering thought, considering the immediate and devastating consequences. Others, perhaps the more pragmatic amongst them, simply chalked it up to bad luck. Just another unfortunate event in a world full of them. Depending on your perspective, it was either a divine message or a random act of nature. Either way, the outcome remained the same. The fire continued to rage, consuming the pavilion piece by piece, until nothing remained but a glowing skeleton of its former self. The crackling of the flames gradually subsided, replaced by the softer hiss and pop of embers cooling in the night air. The smoke thinned, the pungent smell of burning wood lingering in the air, a stark reminder of the destruction that had taken place. As the first rays of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, casting long shadows across the smoldering ruins, I couldn't help but ponder the larger implications of such events. This wasn't just about one temple pavilion. This was a microcosm of a larger issue. I knew that historians still debated the extent to which lightning strikes and the resulting fires impacted architecture and urban planning in Joseon. Did these frequent fires lead to the development of specific building techniques designed to minimize fire spread? Did they influence the layout of cities and villages, perhaps encouraging wider streets or more open spaces between structures? Did they contribute to the preference for certain building materials over others? These were all fascinating questions, and I found myself wondering how such a seemingly random event could have shaped the very fabric of Goseon society. The destruction of the Temple Bell Pavilion, while tragic, served as a stark reminder of the power of nature and the vulnerability of human creations in the face of such forces. It was a lesson in impermanence, a reminder that even the most beautiful and seemingly enduring structures could be reduced to ashes in a single fleeting moment. And it was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the ability to rebuild and adapt in the face of adversity, a trait I had witnessed time and again during my time in Joseon. As the last embers pulsed with a dying orange glow, the skeletal frame of the temple gate stood stark against the lightening sky. The smoke, a swirling gray curtain, finally began to thin, revealing the devastation wrought by the inferno. Amid the smoldering debris, half buried in charred wood and shattered tile, lay the temple bell. It was a heartbreaking sight. Its once perfect bronze surface, polished smooth by countless hands and resonating with years of prayers, was now marred by a jagged crack, a deep fissure that snaked across its side like a lightning strike frozen in time. The crack seemed to symbolize so much more than just physical damage. It was a visual representation of the sudden, violent disruption of order, the shocking fragility of peace in a world so often defined by chaos. The bell, the heart of the temple, the voice that called the faithful to prayer, was silenced. Or rather, its voice had changed. I remember how it used to sound. A deep, resonant hum that vibrated through you, a sound that seemed to cleanse the very air. Now I could only imagine the discordant clang it would produce, a broken whisper of its former glory. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. What would become of it now? Most likely, it would be melted down, the bronze reclaimed, purified, and recast into a new bell. Which, when you think about it, is oddly symbolic, isn't it? The destruction of the old to create the new, a cycle of death and rebirth played out in molten metal. I'd read somewhere that damaged temple bells were often recast. It was a practical matter, really. Bronze was a valuable commodity, and the metal from a cracked bell could be used to create a new one, saving the temple the considerable expense of acquiring fresh materials. It was a sensible solution, a testament to the resourcefulness of the Joseon people, but it also made me wonder about the intangible things, the things you couldn't see or touch. There were whispers, you see. Little snippets of folklore passed down through generations. Some people believed that the spirit of a bell resided within the metal itself, and that when a bell was recast, the spirit of its predecessor lived on in the new casting. It wasn't just the metal being recycled, they said, but the very essence of the bell, its voice, its memories, its connection to the divine. Imagine that a new bell, ringing with the echoes of 100 years of prayers, infused with the spirit of all the monks who had struck its predecessor. It was a beautiful thought, a comforting notion in the face of loss. Others, more practically minded, argued that the difference in sound between a recast bell and a brand new one was simply due to slight variations in the alloy composition, or perhaps the skill of the craftsman. Maybe a trace element from the original bell remained in the recast metal, subtly altering its acoustic properties. Or maybe the mold itself retained some faint memory of the shape it had once held, imparting a subtle influence on the new bell. Whatever the reason, these subtle differences in tone were often interpreted as evidence of the old bell's enduring spirit. It's fascinating, isn't it, how the human mind seeks to find meaning, to connect the dots, even in the seemingly mundane details of metallurgy. To this day, scholars still debate the true significance of recasting bells in Joseon culture. Was it purely a practical matter, dictated by economic necessity? Or did it hold a deeper, more symbolic meaning? Was it a ritualistic act of renewal, a way of honoring the past while embracing the future? Some argue that the meticulous process of recasting, the careful melting down of the old bell, the purification of the metal, the painstaking crafting of the new, mirrored the Buddhist cycle of death and rebirth. The cracked bell, broken and silent, represented the impermanence of all things, while the new bell, born from the ashes of the old, symbolized the enduring power of faith and the promise of renewal. Other scholars, however, dismiss these interpretations as romantic projections, arguing that there is no concrete evidence to support the existence of any specific rituals or beliefs surrounding the recasting of bells. They point to the practical realities of the time, the scarcity of resources, the cost of materials, as the primary driving force behind this practice. They argue that attributing symbolic meaning to such a pragmatic act is a form of historical revisionism, an attempt to impose modern interpretations onto the past. The truth, as is often the case, probably lies somewhere in between. Perhaps the act of recasting a bell was both practical and symbolic, a blend of necessity and belief. Perhaps the Joseon people, like us, found comfort in the idea that even in destruction, there was the potential for renewal, that even in the silence of a cracked bell, there was a whisper of hope for the future. Looking at the shattered remnants of the temple bell, half buried in the ashes, I couldn't help but wonder which interpretation was closer to the truth. Was it simply a broken piece of bronze, destined to be melted down and forgotten? Or was it something more, a vessel of memories, a silent witness to history, waiting to be reborn? The familiar, comforting scent of wood smoke and drying herbs usually calmed me as I approached the village, but today it was overlaid with something else, a dense, almost palpable tension. Small knots of villagers huddled together, their voices hushed but insistent, casting nervous glances at the charred remains of the communal well's shelter. The lightning strike, barely a day old, had already become a festering wound in the village's collective psyche. Divine displeasure, I overheard one woman whisper, her hand trembling as she adjusted the amulet hanging around her neck. The heavens are angry. A man beside her scoffed. Angry? Or just faulty wiring? That old shelter was practically begging for a spark. His pragmatism, however, didn't seem to ease the anxiety etched on his face. Others saw it as a darker omen. A bad sign for the kingdom, an elder muttered, shaking his head. Troubled times ahead, mark my words. The lightning strike, a localized event, had somehow morphed into a portent of national disaster. It was remarkable how quickly such anxieties could spread, weaving themselves into the fabric of daily life. I saw Park, the village rice wine brewer, sitting dejectedly outside his cellar. His usually jovial face was drawn and pale. He normally greeted me with a hearty laugh and a proffered cup of his refreshing Makgeolli, but today he barely acknowledged my presence. His eyes, usually twinkling with merriment, were fixed on the dwindling stock of clay jars lined up outside his cellar. I approached him cautiously. "Park," I began. "How are you faring?" He sighed. A heavy, defeated sound. "My wine, it's cursed." "Cursed?" I repeated, surprised. He gestured towards the charred well shelter. "Bad luck. The villagers. They whisper that the lightning struck because of bad energy emanating from my cellar. They say my Makgeolli is tainted." He ran a hand through his hair, his distress evident. "Who will buy my wine now? How will I feed my family?" His predicament highlighted a larger issue. Natural disasters, even minor ones like this, often triggered waves of social unrest and anxiety in Joseon. People searched for explanations, for someone or something to blame. In the absence of scientific understanding, superstition filled the void. And, unfortunately for Park, his livelihood had become entangled in this web of fear. I remembered the history lessons from my youth. Natural disasters were often interpreted as signs of heavenly displeasure, prompting calls for repentance and increased religious fervor. Sometimes, specific individuals or groups were scapegoated, accused of angering the spirits. It was a dangerous cycle of fear and blame. This wasn't the first time I'd witnessed such reactions. A few years back, a prolonged drought had gripped the region, leading to widespread panic. People had worn amulets depicting dragons, believed to control the rain, and performed elaborate rituals to appease the weather gods. Some even resorted to human sacrifice, a horrific practice thankfully condemned by the royal court. Even now, I noticed more amulets than usual adorning the villagers. Small pouches filled with herbs and inscribed with protective symbols hung from doorways. Children wore bracelets woven with red thread, believed to ward off evil spirits. These practices, while seemingly superstitious, provided a sense of control, a fragile shield against the unknown. It wasn't necessarily about believing wholeheartedly in the power of these charms. It was about grasping at something, anything, to alleviate the pervasive anxiety. The extent to which these popular beliefs and superstitions truly influenced social and political life in Joseon remains a subject of debate among historians. Some argue that these beliefs played a crucial role in shaping policy decisions and social hierarchies. Others maintain that the influence of Confucian principles and pragmatic considerations far outweighed the impact of superstition. It's a complex issue with no easy answers, a puzzle pieced together from fragmented historical records and often conflicting interpretations. But here, in this small village, the impact of these beliefs was tangible. Park's empty cellar, the hushed whispers, the anxious glances, they all spoke to the power of fear and superstition to shape human behavior. The lightning strike hadn't just damaged a wooden shelter. It had struck at the heart of the village's sense of security, unleashing a wave of anxieties that threatened to overwhelm them. It was a stark reminder of the fragile balance between reason and belief, a balance easily disrupted by the forces of nature and the human tendency to seek meaning in the face of the unknown. The whispers started subtly, like the first tremor before an earthquake, a hairline fracture in the great bell of the village of Bayeko. At first, it was just the bell ringer, old Mr. Pack, noticing a slight dissonance in the morning chime. Then, a young boy playing near the pavilion swore he saw a glint of light where no light should be. Soon, the entire village was abuzz, examining the crack with a mixture of awe and fear. News, like spilled water, finds its way into every crevice. It seeped through the mountains, carried by merchants and travelers, down the dusty roads and into the bustling markets, until it reached the royal court. It landed, not with a bang, but with a subtle clinking, in the ears of King Yi. King Yi wasn't a man easily moved by superstition. He saw the world not in shades of divine intervention, but in the cold, hard pragmatism of power. A cracked bell in some remote village wouldn't normally warrant a second thought. His kingdom faced real problems: drought in the north, skirmishes at the border, and the ever-present scheming of the court officials. Yet the whispers about the bell had reached his ears, and that was the problem. It wasn't the bell itself, but the narrative surrounding it. A broken bell could be interpreted as a sign of weakness, of waning royal authority. In a kingdom where power was a fragile equilibrium, even a small crack could shatter the illusion of control. A cracked bell, Yi mused, tapping a long, jade finger on his ornate throne. A sign from the heavens, they say. He let out a dry chuckle. He knew the whispers weren't about the heavens. They were about him. He summoned his advisors, a collection of wizened scholars and ambitious ministers. They offered a range of solutions, from elaborate purification rituals to appease the supposedly angered gods, to simply ignoring the whole affair. Yi listened patiently, his expression unreadable. "We will recast the bell," he declared finally, his voice resonating with authority. The advisors shifted uneasily. Recasting a bell of that size was a costly and time-consuming endeavor. "Your Majesty," one brave advisor ventured, "is such a grand gesture truly necessary? Perhaps a smaller offering, a ritual." Yi cut him off with a wave of his hand. "It is not about the gods," he stated, his gaze sweeping over the assembled advisors. "It is about the people. They see a cracked bell. They whisper of weakness. We will show them strength. We will show them that their king commands even the metal to bend to his will." The truth was, Yi's grip on power was often more tenuous than he let on. The court factions were constantly vying for influence, and the whispers of discontent were never truly silenced. He needed a grand gesture, a display of power, to remind his people, and perhaps himself, who ruled these lands. The decree went out, carried by swift messengers on horseback. The royal workshops were mobilized, the finest metalworkers summoned from across the kingdom. The project became a national endeavor, a spectacle of royal might. The old, cracked bell was brought down with great ceremony, its fragmented chime echoing through the valley one last time. The furnaces roared, the hammers rang, as the new bell took shape, larger and more ornate than its predecessor. And just like some of the Joseon kings of old who had their names or titles inscribed on bells, a subtle declaration of ownership, Yi ensured that his reign would be remembered, not through overt pronouncements, but through the very metal of the bell. He wouldn't have his name inscribed, that would be too crass. Instead, he ordered the royal artisans to incorporate a specific design, a stylized dragon, a symbol traditionally associated with the Yi dynasty, into the bell's intricate carvings. It was a subtle message, woven into the very fabric of the bell, a silent declaration: "This bell, this kingdom is mine." The new bell was raised in a grand ceremony, its resonant chime echoing across the mountains, a symbol of the king's restored authority, or so it seemed. The villagers of Bayeko, awed by the spectacle, returned to their routines. The whispers subsided, replaced by the comforting rhythm of the new bell. But in the hushed corners of the court, the whispers continued, albeit in different tones. The king had demonstrated his power, yes, but at what cost? Was it true strength, or a carefully constructed facade? Even today, scholars pore over the historical records, debating the true effectiveness of such royal decrees and public works. Did they genuinely solidify the king's authority, fostering social order and legitimacy? Or were they merely elaborate performances, designed to distract from the underlying tensions and instabilities of the Joseon dynasty? The great bell of Baeko stands silent, a testament to King Yi's reign, a resonant echo in the ongoing debate about power, image, and the delicate balance of maintaining order in a kingdom. The bell remains, a symbol not just of royal power, but of the enduring questions it sought to answer. The glow painted the faces of the gathered villagers in flickering orange and red. It pulsed with the heart of the furnace, a brick behemoth rising from the center of the village square like a squat, hungry god. Tongues of flame licked at the night sky, devouring the darkness and spitting it back out as swirling smoke. The acrid tang of burning wood and something else, something metallic and sharp, stung my nostrils. I watched, mesmerized, as the artisans, their faces streaked with soot and sweat, moved with a practiced grace around the inferno. They were preparing to recast the bell. The old bell, cracked and silent, lay discarded near the furnace, a forlorn shadow of its former glory. It had served the village for generations, its voice marking the passage of time, calling the faithful to prayer, and warning of danger. Now it was broken, its voice silenced, and the village felt its absence keenly. The artisans moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Some stoked the furnace with long poles, feeding the insatiable flames. Others prepared the molds, packing the damp earth with meticulous care, ensuring every curve and detail was perfect. The molten bronze, a bubbling, incandescent pool within the furnace's heart, glowed with an almost unearthly light. It shifted and roiled, spitting sparks that danced in the air like fiery insects. Around me, the villagers watched with a mixture of awe and a healthy dose of apprehension. They murmured amongst themselves, their voices hushed by the spectacle unfolding before them. Old man Choi, the village elder, leaned heavily on his staff, his eyes never leaving the molten metal. Children peeked from behind their parents' skirts, their eyes wide with wonder and perhaps a touch of fear. Park, the village wine brewer, stood beside me, scratching his chin thoughtfully. "Think they'd mind if I dipped my wine jar in there?" he muttered, gesturing towards the bubbling bronze. "Got a nasty leak I can't seem to fix." I gave him a sideways glance. "Park," I said, "that's molten bronze. It would melt your wine jar, not fix it." He chuckled, a rumbling sound in his chest. "Just a thought," he said with a shrug, his eyes still fixed on the glowing metal. "A man can dream, can't he?" The recasting of a bell was not a simple task. It was a delicate and intricate process, demanding skill, knowledge, and a deep understanding of metallurgy. These artisans were masters of their craft, their hands guided by generations of tradition and experience. During the Joseon dynasty, bell casting was a highly specialized field, requiring years of apprenticeship and training. The techniques passed down through families, each guarding their secrets closely. The composition of the bronze itself was a carefully guarded formula, a blend of copper, tin, and other metals, each contributing to the bell's unique tone and resonance. I'd heard stories, whispers of secrets passed down through generations of bell makers. Some artisans, it was said, added small amounts of gold or silver to the molten bronze. Some claimed it enhanced the bell's resonance, giving it a richer, more ethereal tone. Others suspected it was simply a way to make the bell slightly more valuable, a little extra insurance against hard times. Whatever the reason, the practice spoke to the reverence with which these bells were treated, the importance they held within the community. As the molten bronze reached the perfect temperature, a hush fell over the crowd. The artisans moved with renewed purpose, their movements precise and coordinated. With a concerted effort, they tilted the massive crucible, releasing a fiery stream of liquid metal into the waiting mold. The air hissed and crackled as the bronze met the damp earth, sending plumes of steam billowing into the night. The intense heat radiated outward, pushing the villagers back a few steps. The sight was hypnotic. The raw power of the molten metal, both terrifying and awe-inspiring. It was a moment pregnant with meaning, a rebirth of the village's voice. I thought about the rituals and ceremonies that might have accompanied such an event in the past. Historians still debate whether specific rituals were performed during the recasting of temple bells in the Joseon dynasty. Some believe elaborate ceremonies were conducted, prayers offered to the gods for a successful casting and a harmonious tone. Others argue that the process was primarily a practical one, focused on the technical aspects of the craft rather than any spiritual significance. The truth, likely, lies somewhere in between, a blend of practical skill and spiritual reverence. Regardless of the historical accuracy, there was an undeniable sense of ceremony in the air tonight. The villagers, whether they realized it or not, were participating in a ritual, a communal act of renewal and hope. Once the mold was filled, the artisans carefully sealed it, leaving the molten bronze to cool and solidify. The glow of the furnace slowly subsided, the flames dying down to embers. The night air, still thick with the scent of smoke and metal, began to cool. The villagers, their faces still flushed with the heat of the furnace, began to disperse, their voices regaining their usual volume. The recasting was complete. Now, all that remained was the waiting, the anticipation of hearing the bell's new voice ring out across the village once more. Finally, it happened. The crucible, glowing like a miniature sun, tilted forward, and the molten bronze began its slow, fiery descent. A river of liquid fire, shimmering orange and yellow, poured into the waiting mold. The hissing sound was intense, like 1,000 angry serpents, accompanied by a thick cloud of steam that billowed upwards, obscuring the moon in a momentary haze. I instinctively clapped my hands over my ears, the heat radiating outwards in waves. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. I held my breath, not wanting to inhale any of the metallic-smelling steam, and watched, mesmerized, as the mold slowly filled. The fiery liquid settled, the hissing gradually subsided, replaced by the quieter crackling and popping of cooling metal. The air, thick with the smell of hot bronze and damp earth, felt heavy and charged. Now came the waiting. The most excruciating part of the whole process. It had taken weeks to prepare the mold, days to melt the bronze, and mere minutes to pour it. But cooling? Cooling took hours, an agonizingly slow process during which any number of things could go wrong. Cracks could form, bubbles could rise, the metal could cool unevenly. The artisans paced, their faces etched with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. I found myself mimicking their nervous energy, wandering aimlessly around the casting pit, kicking at loose stones, and occasionally glancing up at the moon, as if it held the answers to the success of our endeavor. As the first rays of dawn painted the eastern sky, the metal had finally cooled enough to begin the next stage. The artisans, armed with hammers and chisels, carefully began to chip away at the outer layers of the mold, piece by piece. The process was slow and painstaking, each strike measured and deliberate. With each fragment of clay that fell away, a little more of the bell's surface was revealed, gleaming dully in the early morning light. The suspense was almost unbearable. Finally, the last of the mold crumbled away and the newly cast bell stood revealed in all its glory. Its surface, still warm to the touch, gleamed softly in the strengthening sunlight. A collective sigh of relief swept through the assembled artisans. It was beautiful. The shape was perfect, the surface smooth and unblemished. I caught myself thinking, wow, that's oddly satisfying. A sentiment that was immediately followed by the sobering realization that someone still had to hang the behemoth. And who would that someone be? Me, most likely. Because, as I've learned time and time again, no good deed goes unpunished. Before the bell could be hoisted into its designated position, however, it had to be tested. Newly cast bells were always meticulously evaluated for their tone and resonance. This was a crucial step, as the sound of the bell was considered just as important, if not more so, than its appearance. A bell with a poor tone, no matter how beautiful it looked, was considered a failure. The head artisan, a wizened old man with calloused hands and keen eyes, approached the bell with a small hammer. He struck it gently near the rim, and a clear, resonant tone rang out, echoing across the courtyard. He struck it again in a different spot, and a slightly different tone was produced. He continued this process, meticulously mapping the bell's sonic landscape, listening intently to each note, his head cocked to one side like a curious bird. He then proceeded to explain, with a surprising amount of detail, how the bell's sound could be further refined. Apparently, some bells were tuned by shaving small amounts of metal from their surface. This was an incredibly delicate process, requiring immense skill and precision. Shaving off too much metal could ruin the bell entirely, while shaving off too little could leave the tone unsatisfactory. It was a high-stakes balancing act, a testament to the artisan's dedication to their craft. They weren't just casting bells, they were sculpting sound. The old artisan pointed to a set of specialized tools laid out on a nearby table. Thin, curved files, delicate scrapers, and small, precisely weighted hammers. Each tool had its specific purpose, each designed to remove minute amounts of metal with exacting control. It was fascinating, watching him work. He'd strike the bell, listen intently, then carefully shave a sliver of metal from a specific spot. He'd strike it again, listen, and repeat the process, slowly and methodically coaxing the desired tone from the bronze. He made it look easy, but I knew it was anything but. One slip, one misplaced scrape, and the entire bell could be ruined. Later, as we sat around a crackling fire, enjoying a well-deserved meal after the successful casting, the conversation drifted to the topic of bell tones and their regional variations. It turns out that the precise standards for bell tones and resonance in the Joseon period are still a matter of debate among scholars. Some believe that there were strict, standardized guidelines that dictated the ideal sound of a bell, while others argue that there was significant regional variation, with different areas preferring different tonal qualities. Some scholars point to written records and surviving bells as evidence of standardization, citing similarities in design and tone. Others counter that these similarities are superficial and that the subtle nuances of each bell's sound reveal a rich tapestry of regional preferences and traditions. The debate continues, with no clear consensus in sight. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the middle, a blend of standardization and regional variation, reflecting both the unifying influence of the central government and the unique cultural identities of different communities. It's a fascinating puzzle, a reminder that even seemingly simple objects like bells can hold within them complex layers of history and cultural significance. As I drifted off to sleep, the echoes of the newly cast bell still ringing faintly in my ears, I couldn't help but wonder what stories this bell would tell in the years to come. What songs would it sing? Sweat beaded on my brow, stinging my eyes as I hauled on the thick rope. My hands, raw and blistered, gripped the coarse fibers, each pull a small victory against the immense weight of the bronze bell. Around me, the other villagers mirrored my strain, their grunts and exhales forming a rhythmic chorus that echoed through the newly constructed pavilion. We were a motley crew, farmers, fishermen, even old Mr. Choi, the village scholar, his face a mask of surprising determination. Teamwork makes the dream work, right? Even if the dream was currently threatening to pull our arms from their sockets. The new bell, gleaming in the afternoon sun, inched its way upwards, a testament to our collective effort. It had taken weeks to cast, its surface intricately carved with dragons and swirling clouds, symbols of prosperity and good fortune. Now it hung suspended between earth and sky, a heavy pendulum of hope for our village. Slowly, painstakingly, we guided it towards the sturdy wooden beam that would be its final resting place. Every inch gained was celebrated with a renewed surge of energy, a collective groan giving way to a grunt of renewed effort. This wasn't just a bell. It was a symbol of our resilience, our ability to rebuild after the fire that had ravaged our temple months before. The pavilion, also newly built, smelled of fresh-cut pine. Sunlight streamed through the open sides, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. We had worked tirelessly, each contributing what they could, timber, labor, even rice cakes to keep our energy up. And now, as the bell finally swung into place, a wave of accomplishment washed over us. My back screamed in protest, my muscles thrumming with exhaustion, but a grin stretched across my face. We had done it. Park, the village wine brewer, wiped his brow with the back of his hand, his eyes fixed on the intricate system of ropes and pulleys we had rigged. Ingenious, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. I wonder if I could use something like this to hoist those heavy wine jars into my cellar. My back hasn't been the same since that last batch of plum wine. He chuckled, already envisioning a future free from the strain of manually lowering his precious cargo. Hanging a temple bell, as we had discovered, wasn't just a matter of brute strength. It required careful planning and coordination, a delicate dance of physics and teamwork. Mr. Choi, ever the scholar, had consulted ancient texts, outlining the precise measurements and angles needed for the bell to hang perfectly, its resonance maximized for optimal spiritual effect. He explained how in the past, hanging a temple bell was a significant communal effort, a ritual as important as the casting of the bell itself. It was a time for the village to come together, to share a common goal, strengthening the bonds that held them together. Some bells, Mr. Choi further elaborated, eyes twinkling with fascination, were hung with elaborate ropes and decorations, vibrant tassels and silken cords. These weren't just aesthetic flourishes. They were believed to enhance the bell's spiritual significance, imbuing it with greater power and sanctity. He described bells adorned with feathers, thought to carry prayers to the heavens, and intricately knotted ropes symbolizing the interconnectedness of all things. Or maybe, he added with a sly smile, they just made the bells look pretty. It was hard to say for sure. Even now, he explained, historians debate the specific methods and tools used for hanging temple bells during the Joseon dynasty. Some argued for the use of complex lever systems, others for elaborate scaffolding. The truth, likely lost to time, was probably a combination of techniques, adapted to the specific circumstances and resources of each individual village. Our method, born of necessity and ingenuity, was likely not so different from those employed centuries ago. We had relied on simple tools, readily available materials, and the combined strength of our community. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the pavilion. The villagers, weary but satisfied, began to disperse, their chatter filled with the day's accomplishment. The bell, now silent, hung majestic in the fading light, a symbol of hope and renewal, a testament to the enduring spirit of our village. As I walked home, my muscles aching but my heart full, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of connection, not just to my fellow villagers, but to the generations who had come before us, who had faced their own challenges and triumphs, their own rituals of rebuilding and renewal. And I knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within my bones, that the sound of that bell, when it finally rang, would carry with it the echoes of our shared history, our collective strength, and our unwavering hope for the future. The moment had arrived. Dust motes danced in the torchlight, swirling around Elder Choi's gnarled hands as he gripped the thick wooden beam. He stood, small and wizened, but somehow radiating an immense, quiet power, before the newly hung bell. Its bronze surface gleamed, catching the flickering flames and reflecting them back in a warm, inviting glow. A hush fell over the assembled villagers. They'd spent weeks, months even, rebuilding after the bandit raid, and this bell, cast from melted-down weaponry, was more than just a timekeeper. It was a symbol of their resilience, a testament to their refusal to be broken. Elder Choi took a deep breath, the kind that precedes a momentous occasion, or perhaps a particularly difficult bowel movement. It was hard to tell with Elder Choi. And then, with a grunt of effort, swung the beam. The clang that reverberated through the night was nothing short of magnificent. It wasn't just loud, it was resonant, a deep, clear note that seemed to vibrate in your very bones. It echoed off the surrounding hills, a sonic wave washing over the valley, carrying with it a sense of peace, of restored order. It was inspiring. You found yourself caught up in the moment, a silly grin spreading across your face. Wow, you thought, that's pretty cool. The feeling lasted approximately 30 seconds. Because that's when Elder Choi, beaming like a proud grandpa who just taught his toddler to burp the alphabet, turned to you. "Excellent sound, wouldn't you say?" he asked, his voice raspy with age. You nodded dumbly, still slightly awestruck. "Good, good," he chuckled, clapping you on the shoulder with surprising force. "Then I trust you'll have no objections to ringing it every morning from now on?" "Wait, what?" Your grin evaporated faster than a puddle in the desert sun. "Every morning?" you squeaked, your voice barely above a whisper. No good deed goes unpunished. Part 2. You'd helped with the casting, sure. You'd even suggested melting down the bandit leader's ridiculously oversized sword for the clapper. You'd thought it was funny at the time. Apparently your sense of humor wasn't shared by the village elders. "Of course, every morning," Elder Choi replied, as if this was the most obvious thing in the world. The village needs to know when to rise, when to work, when to rest. It's a vital role, a position of great honor. He patted your shoulder again, this time a little less enthusiastically, perhaps sensing your sudden lack of enthusiasm. "Think of it as a contribution to the community. You swallowed hard, trying to conjure up a shred of enthusiasm, a contribution to the community. Right. Because waking up before the sun even considered showing its face was exactly how you'd envisioned spending your mornings. You'd had vague plans of, sleeping. As the villagers dispersed, chattering excitedly about the new bell and completely oblivious to your impending doom, you lingered, staring up at the bronze behemoth. It suddenly seemed less like a symbol of hope and more like a giant, gleaming instrument of torture. You spent the rest of the evening trying to figure out how you'd gotten yourself into this mess. You recalled reading somewhere that bell ringing often accompanied specific rituals and ceremonies in Joseon. This made sense. The rhythmic clang of a bell certainly added a certain gravitas to any occasion, whether it was a religious festival, a royal procession, or even just the beginning of the workday. You just hadn't realized that every morning counted as a ritual. You also remembered a quirky tidbit about bell ringers developing distinctive rhythms or patterns, almost like a musical signature. Some would vary the speed and force of their strikes, creating complex melodies. Others would incorporate elaborate flourishes, twirling the beam or even juggling multiple bells. Maybe, you mused, you could develop a signature rhythm of your own, something slow, something sleepy. Perhaps a gentle, lulling clang that would inadvertently encourage everyone to go back to sleep. You imagined the villagers waking up, hearing the slow, almost hypnotic ringing, and deciding, 5 more minutes. You knew deep down that this wouldn't work. Elder Choi would have your hide if you dared to disrupt the established routine. Still, it was a nice thought. Later, huddled by the dying embers of the fire, you overheard a group of scholars, because apparently, even small, remote villages had resident scholars engaged in a heated debate. They were discussing, of all things, the social status and roles of bell ringers in Joseon communities. Some argued that they were revered figures, respected for their dedication and the vital service they provided. Others claimed they were simply low-ranking laborers, tasked with a menial, albeit necessary, chore. There seemed to be no consensus. This, you realized, was probably why Elder Choi had been so vague about the honor associated with the position. You sighed, staring up at the star-dusted sky. The new bell, now silent, loomed large in the darkness, a constant reminder of your new, unwanted responsibility. You briefly considered running away, joining a traveling theater troupe, perhaps, or becoming a hermit and living in a cave. Anything to avoid the relentless clang of that bell. But then you thought of the villagers, of the hope that the bell represented, and you knew you couldn't leave. Besides, where would you go? You were terrible at juggling. As the first rays of dawn kissed the horizon, you trudged towards the bell tower, a sense of resignation settling over you. Elder Choi was already there, waiting with a smug smile. "Ready to embrace your destiny?" he asked, handing you the wooden beam. You took a deep breath, closed your eyes, and swung. The bell rang out, clear and resonant, announcing the start of a new day. And the start of your new, very noisy, life. The whispers started subtly, like the rustling of leaves before a storm. Word had reached the capital. Again. Not of the cracked bell, not of the failed attempts, not of the village's shame, but of its ultimate triumph. News of the recast bell, its clear resonant song echoing through the valley, had somehow, impossibly, traveled faster than the bad news that preceded it, and it had reached the ears of King Yi. King Yi, a man whose interest in bronze casting was about as deep as a puddle after a light rain, decided a visit was in order. Not, of course, because he possessed a sudden, fervent passion for metallurgy. No, King Yi saw an opportunity to attach himself to a success story, to bask in the reflected glory of the village's perseverance. A little public goodwill never hurt a monarch, after all, and so the news rippled through our village. The king was coming. A flurry of activity erupted. Homes were scrubbed, paths swept, and everyone, including myself, was instructed to wear their finest, albeit patched and faded, clothes. Royal visits, we were reminded by the village elder, were not optional events. Attendance was mandatory, enthusiasm was expected, and any hint of dissatisfaction was swiftly and severely punished. We lined the stepping-stone path leading into the village, heads bowed low, our best smiles plastered onto our faces. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the stiff formal robes we wore offered little comfort. Children fidgeted, swatting at flies, while their parents hissed admonishments. My own stomach churned with a mixture of anxiety and resentment. We had toiled and sacrificed to recast the bell, and now the king, who hadn't lifted a finger, would arrive to claim the credit. The royal procession finally came into view, a dazzling display of colorful silks, gleaming armor, and fluttering banners. King Yi, seated upon a palanquin carried by 4 sturdy men, looked regal and aloof. His entourage trailed behind, a long line of officials, servants, and guards. The air crackled with an unspoken power, a palpable reminder of the king's authority. As he passed, we bowed even lower, murmuring greetings that were lost in the general hubbub. King Yi acknowledged our presence with a slight nod, a gesture that felt more perfunctory than genuine. Still, a ripple of excitement ran through the crowd. This was the king, the very embodiment of Joseon power. To be so close, to be acknowledged, was, for many, a once-in-a-lifetime experience. The visit followed a predictable pattern, one meticulously orchestrated to reinforce the king's image as a benevolent ruler. He toured the village, admiring the freshly whitewashed walls and the neatly arranged fields. He praised the villagers' diligence and loyalty, his words dripping with practiced sincerity. He even, as some kings were known to do, distributed small gifts, pouches of rice, lengths of silk, a subtle but effective way of buying favor and reinforcing his generosity. 1 or 2 fortunate villagers, chosen for their perceived loyalty, or perhaps their strategic placement within the village hierarchy, were granted royal pardons for minor offenses, a public demonstration of the king's mercy. These carefully orchestrated events, designed to showcase the king's power and benevolence, were common practice during the Joseon dynasty. They were part spectacle, part political theater, a way for the monarch to connect with his subjects, albeit in a highly controlled and formalized manner. King Yi's visit was no different. Later, after the king and his entourage had departed, leaving a trail of dust and a buzz of excited chatter in their wake, the villagers gathered in the village square. The atmosphere was strangely subdued. While some were genuinely awestruck by the royal visit, others, like myself, felt a lingering sense of unease. The king had praised our hard work, but he had also, in a way, appropriated it. He had taken ownership of our triumph, transforming it into a symbol of his own wise and benevolent rule. The open debate among historians regarding the actual impact of royal visits on local communities and governance during the Joseon dynasty resonated deeply with me that day. Did these visits truly bring about positive change? Did they foster a sense of connection between the ruler and the ruled? Or were they simply elaborate performances designed to maintain the status quo and reinforce the existing power structures? The recast bell, now a symbol of both the village's resilience and the king's supposed beneficence, stood silent in the center of the square. Its resonant tone, so full of promise and pride just days earlier, now seemed tinged with a note of ambiguity. The king's visit, while undoubtedly a momentous occasion, had left us with more questions than answers. Had we truly gained something, or had we, in our eagerness to please the king, lost something even more precious? The answer, I suspected, was as complex and multifaceted as the bell itself. The king, resplendent in his silk robes, circled the newly cast bell, a behemoth of bronze gleaming under the midday sun. He tapped it lightly with a gloved hand, the sound resonating with a deep, clear tone. A small, satisfied smile played on his lips. He nodded approvingly, a gesture more of regal duty than genuine understanding of the complex mechanics of bell casting. Turning to the assembled villagers, his expression shifted into one of benevolent authority. He raised his bejeweled cup. "A toast," he declared, his voice carrying across the square, "to order and prosperity." The villagers echoed the sentiment, raising their own, significantly less ornate, drinking vessels. Order and prosperity. Well, one could certainly hope. Free food and drink were definitely a form of prosperity, as far as I was concerned. The royal feast, laid out on long trestle tables groaning under the weight of the bounty, was a sight to behold. Roasted meats, glistening with glaze, mountains of rice, colorful arrays of vegetables, and steaming bowls of fragrant soups. It was a feast fit for, well, a king, and us, apparently. Because free food is free food, right? We all dug in with gusto, the earlier anxiety surrounding the bell casting fading into the background, replaced by the more immediate concern of securing a second helping of the particularly delicious honey cakes. The festive atmosphere was infectious. Laughter and chatter filled the air, punctuated by the occasional clang of a dropped spoon or a contented sigh. Park, the village wine brewer, approached the king, a nervous tremor in his hand as he proffered a small clay cup filled with his latest batch of Makgeolli, a milky, slightly effervescent rice wine. Park's Makgeolli was renowned in the village, sometimes for its potency, other times for its unpredictable nature. There had been that one incident last spring where a batch had spontaneously fermented with such vigor that it had exploded, coating the inside of Park's house in a sticky, slightly alcoholic mess. He'd spent weeks cleaning it up, smelling faintly of fermented rice. Hopefully this batch wouldn't repeat that performance, especially not in the king's face. The king, ever the picture of composure, accepted the offering with a gracious nod. He brought the cup to his lips, took a tentative sip, and then, to everyone's relief, a genuine smile spread across his face. "Excellent," he declared, much to Park's visible relief, who promptly collapsed onto a nearby stool, wiping sweat from his brow. The royal seal of approval, it seemed, was enough to send a man's nerves into overdrive. Such feasts and celebrations were a common occurrence during the Joseon dynasty, often accompanying royal visits like this one, or marking important events such as harvests, religious festivals, or even the completion of a significant project, like, say, casting a giant bell. They served as a tangible demonstration of royal favor and a way to reinforce the social hierarchy. The king's presence at the feast, his partaking of the food and drink, symbolized his connection to the people and reinforced the idea of a harmonious relationship between the ruler and the ruled. Some of these feasts, especially those held within the royal court, were truly extravagant affairs. Elaborate dishes, prepared with exotic ingredients and presented with artistic flair, were meant to impress not only the king, but also any visiting dignitaries. Music, dance, and other forms of entertainment added to the spectacle, creating a dazzling display of wealth and power. One could argue that such displays were also a clever way to distract from any underlying problems, to create a veneer of prosperity and contentment, even if the reality for many commoners was far less glamorous. The social and political significance of these feasts and celebrations is still a subject of debate among scholars. Some argue that they served primarily as a form of social control, a way for the ruling elite to maintain their power and influence. By providing food and entertainment, they could appease the populace and prevent dissent. Others see these events as a genuine expression of communal unity, a chance for people from all walks of life to come together and celebrate shared values and traditions. The lavish displays of wealth, they argue, were not merely a show of power, but also a way to honor the gods and ancestors, ensuring continued blessings and prosperity for the kingdom. The truth, as is often the case, likely lies somewhere in between. These feasts and celebrations were complex social and political events, serving multiple purposes simultaneously. They were a demonstration of royal power and a reaffirmation of social hierarchy, but also an opportunity for communal bonding and a celebration of shared cultural identity. Regardless of their true significance, one thing is certain. For the villagers, the royal feast was a welcome respite from the daily grind, a chance to enjoy good food, good company, and perhaps even a little bit of good wine, courtesy of Park, the occasionally explosive but ultimately talented wine brewer. And as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the village square, the lingering taste of honey cakes and the warm glow of Makgeolli in our bellies, who were we to question the motives behind the king's generosity? Order and prosperity indeed. At least for tonight. The dust settled on the rutted road, a fine ochre film coating the freshly swept thresholds of the village houses. The king's entourage, a vibrant, boisterous whirlwind that had descended upon their quiet lives, was gone. A palpable sigh, collective and almost audible, rippled through the little community nestled at the foot of the mountain. Relief, pure and unadulterated, washed over me, followed closely by a persistent gurgle in my stomach. A consequence, no doubt, of the rich and unfamiliar delicacies pressed upon us during the royal feast. Let's be honest, a king's visit is an honor, but 3 days of elaborate banquets can be a bit much for a simple farmer's digestion. The familiar clang of the recast bell, its tone slightly off-key but comforting nonetheless, echoed through the valley. It was a welcome sound, marking the return to normalcy. The rhythm of village life, momentarily disrupted by the royal presence, resumed its steady beat. Farmers returned to the fields, their hoes rhythmically striking the earth. Women gathered at the well, their chatter filling the air. Children's laughter once again rang out from the village school. The king's visit had been a fleeting spectacle, a vibrant splash of color on the canvas of their ordinary lives. But the canvas itself remained unchanged. Park, the village wine brewer, emerged from his workshop, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. A knowing smile played on his lips. Tucked under his arm, wrapped in a clean cloth, were several untouched delicacies from the royal banquet: preserved plums, candied ginger, and a small parcel of dried persimmons. "Waste not, want not," he always said. He resumed his work, stirring the bubbling Makgeolli in his large clay pots. The sweet, fermented scent of rice wine, a constant presence in the village, filled the air, a fragrant reminder of continuity amid the brief chaos. The departure of a royal entourage was always a complex affair, leaving behind a mix of emotions. Relief, certainly, at the return to familiar routines and the lifting of the pressure to maintain an impeccable facade for the royal gaze. But there was also a tinge of anxiety, a quiet uncertainty about the future. Would the king's visit bring favor or misfortune? Would their requests, humbly presented during a royal audience, be granted? The answers to these questions remained suspended in the air, like dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun. Inside their homes, some villagers carefully tucked away small mementos of the royal visit: a discarded ribbon, a chipped teacup, a faded flower from the royal palanquin, seemingly insignificant trinkets, but imbued with the aura of royalty. Because everyone loves a good souvenir, a tangible reminder of an extraordinary event that had briefly touched their ordinary lives. These relics would become treasured possessions, passed down through generations, whispered stories weaving around them, embellishing the narrative of the king's visit with each retelling. The children, wide-eyed and still buzzing with the excitement of the past few days, chased each other through the narrow lanes, mimicking the elaborate bows and gestures of the court officials. They clutched small wooden swords, pretending to be the royal guards, their imaginations fueled by the spectacle they had witnessed. The king's visit, though brief, had planted seeds of dreams in their young minds. Dreams of adventure, of courtly intrigue, of a world beyond their quiet village. The elders, gathered in the shade of the old banyan tree, sipped their tea and debated the merits and demerits of the royal visit. Some lamented the disruption to their routines, the expense of hosting the royal entourage, and the inevitable scrutiny that came with such attention. Others spoke of the honor bestowed upon their village, the potential for royal patronage, and the opportunity to present their grievances directly to the king. The king's visit, like a ripple in a pond, spread outwards, its effects subtle, yet pervasive, touching every aspect of village life. Historians, poring over dusty scrolls and official records, continue to debate the extent to which these royal visits impacted local economies and social structures in Joseon. Did they provide a much-needed boost to local trade, or did they impose an unbearable burden on the villagers? Did they strengthen the ties between the central government and the rural communities, or did they exacerbate existing inequalities? The evidence is often contradictory, the interpretations varied, and the debate continues to this day. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the valley, the village settled into a quiet hum. The king's departure marked not an ending, but a transition. Life returned to its familiar rhythm, yet subtly altered, imbued with the lingering memory of a royal presence. The recast bell, slightly off-key, continued to mark the passage of time, a constant reminder of the enduring resilience of the village, and its ability to absorb the ripples of even the most extraordinary events, like the ebb and flow of the tide against the shore. The king had come and gone, but life, in all its simplicity and complexity, went on. Months melted into weeks. Weeks trickled into days. Summer's vibrant greens faded to the rusty hues of autumn. The stepping stones, once warm beneath my feet, were now slick with a near-constant drizzle. The river, a playful stream in sunnier times, was now a swollen, churning beast, its banks overflowing with muddy water. Leaves, torn from their branches, danced frantically on its surface, swept along by the current. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and impending rain. I trudged along the familiar path, head bowed against the wind, pulling my cloak tighter around me. The sky was the color of bruised plums, heavy and oppressive. This weather is giving me major cracked bell vibes, I thought, a shiver running down my spine. And as if summoned by my own words, the storm erupted. One moment, a dreary drizzle, the next, a deluge. The rain lashed down with a ferocity that stole my breath. The wind, no longer a mournful whisper through the trees, now howled like a banshee, tearing at branches and whipping the rain into a frenzy. I stumbled forward, blinded by the downpour, clutching at the rough bark of a nearby tree for support. The river roared in the distance, its voice amplified by the storm. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the village in brief, stark flashes. Each flash revealed a scene of chaotic motion. Trees bending double, thatched roofs straining against the wind, villagers scurrying for cover. I fought my way towards the village square, the wind and rain pushing me back with every step. My mind, however, was fixed on the bell tower, silhouetted against the raging sky. It stood there, seemingly defiant, a beacon in the storm. But could it withstand this onslaught? Could the recast bell, the symbol of our resilience, survive this test? Irony, I thought grimly, was always lurking, waiting to snatch victory from the jaws of triumph. The thought clung to me like the icy rain plastering my clothes to my skin. The villagers, those who hadn't already sought shelter, were battling their way through the storm, their faces etched with worry. Seasonal storms and floods were a common occurrence in Joseon, a harsh reality of life. We all knew the damage they could inflict, the devastation they could wreak upon our crops, our homes, our livelihoods. The memory of past floods, the submerged fields, the ruined homes, the gnawing hunger that followed, was a shared trauma etched deep within the collective memory of the village. Some of the villagers, particularly those living near the riverbanks, had taken precautions. Their houses, perched precariously on stilts or built on slightly higher ground, stood like awkward birds amidst the swirling waters. It wasn't exactly a picturesque sight, those rickety structures with their uneven foundations, but they were a testament to the villagers' ingenuity and their determination to survive. These weren't aesthetically pleasing solutions, but they were practical. They represented a hard-won understanding of the land and its unpredictable nature. The effectiveness of these measures, however, was a subject of ongoing debate. Scholars, safe in their libraries and academies, argued endlessly about the best methods of flood control. Grand infrastructure projects, elaborate irrigation systems, and complex drainage plans were discussed and debated, often with little practical application. The villagers, on the other hand, relied on their own experience, their own hard-won knowledge of the land and the river's whims. They knew that no man-made structure could fully tame the fury of nature. The debate raged on, a distant echo compared to the immediate threat of the storm. Finally, I reached the relative shelter of the village square, the wind momentarily less fierce. The bell tower loomed over me, the rain streaming down its wooden frame. I squinted through the downpour, trying to gauge the damage. So far, it seemed to be holding its own. The bell remained silent, its voice swallowed by the roar of the storm. Perhaps, just perhaps, it would weather this storm, both literally and metaphorically. The storm raged through the night, a relentless assault on the village. Huddled in my small home, I listened to the wind howling, the rain hammering against the roof, the river roaring its defiance. Sleep was impossible. My mind raced, filled with anxieties about the bell, the village, the future. Would we survive this? Would the bell, our symbol of hope, withstand the fury of nature? As dawn finally broke, the storm began to subside. The rain eased to a drizzle, the wind died down to a whisper. The sky, though still overcast, held a hint of light. I stepped outside, my body aching, my spirit weary. The village square was a scene of devastation. Broken branches littered the ground, thatched roofs lay in tatters, and the river, still swollen and angry, carried debris on its churning surface. But the bell tower still stood, tall, proud, and seemingly unscathed. And as the first rays of the sun broke through the clouds, a faint, clear sound echoed through the village. The bell, cracked, flawed, but still ringing. Another blinding flash of lightning tore through the inky blackness outside, illuminating the rain-lashed windows of my home for a fleeting second. I involuntarily flinched, pressing myself deeper into the cushions of the warmest room in the house. "No way," I muttered. "Not again." The words were barely out of my mouth when the world exploded in a deafening crash, a sound so loud it vibrated through the very floorboards. My stomach plummeted. I knew that sound. It was the unmistakable clang of the temple bell, only distorted, broken. The wind howled outside like a banshee, driving the rain against the windows in relentless sheets. I stayed huddled inside, because honestly, who in their right mind would venture out in this weather? The storm raged for what felt like hours, an unrelenting symphony of wind, rain, and thunder. When the fury finally began to subside and the first tentative rays of dawn crept through the storm clouds, I cautiously ventured out. The scene that greeted me at the temple was one of utter devastation. The pavilion, already weakened by the previous fire, had completely succumbed to the storm's wrath. Its ornate roof had caved in, its once proud pillars now splintered and broken, and amidst the debris, half buried in the mud and wreckage, lay the great bell. Its bronze surface, already scarred by the first lightning strike, now bore a second, jagged crack, like a cruel, cosmic grin. I stood there, the drizzle still clinging to my hair and clothes, staring at the ruined bell in disbelief. A wry chuckle escaped my lips, a mixture of awe and incredulity. Was fate playing some kind of cosmic joke? Was this some elaborate celestial punchline I was too dense to understand? 2 lightning strikes on the same bell, in the span of a few months. It seemed excessive, even for the heavens. Now, I know what you're thinking. What are the odds? Surely lightning doesn't strike the same place twice, right? That's just an old wives' tale. Well, let me tell you, while it's certainly rare, it's not impossible. In fact, repeated lightning strikes on the same location weren't entirely unheard of in Joseon. Lightning, it seems, doesn't carry a GPS and has a rather indiscriminate approach to its targets. Tall, prominent structures like the Temple Bell Tower were particularly vulnerable. Think of it as a cosmic lottery, and unfortunately, the Temple Bell had just won the unlucky jackpot twice. This wasn't just a matter of bad luck, though. The incident sent ripples of unease through the community. Whispers began circulating, fueled by superstition and fear. Some people muttered about divine displeasure, claiming that the repeated strikes were a sign of a curse. Others, perhaps more pragmatically, simply saw it as a string of incredibly bad luck. Either way, the incident sparked a wave of anxious speculation. Was the bell cursed? Was the temple itself tainted? Or was this simply a bizarre, albeit destructive, act of nature? The story of the twice-struck bell quickly became a local legend, passed down through generations. Each retelling embellished the details, adding layers of drama and mystique. Some versions claimed that a malevolent spirit resided within the bell, attracting the lightning's fury. Others whispered of a prophecy foretold, a warning of impending doom. Of course, historians now debate the accuracy of these accounts. Were they genuine historical events, or were they embellished over time, transformed into cautionary tales and folklore? It's a question that often arises when examining historical narratives, particularly those that describe unusual or seemingly improbable events. The line between fact and fiction can become blurred, especially in the absence of concrete evidence. How much can we trust the accounts passed down through generations? How much is historical truth and how much is embellishment, added to heighten the drama and capture the imagination? It's a fascinating conundrum. On the one hand, dismissing these stories as mere folklore risks overlooking valuable insights into the beliefs and anxieties of the time. These tales, however fantastical they may seem, can offer a glimpse into the cultural and spiritual landscape of Joseon. They reveal what people feared, what they believed, and how they interpreted the world around them. On the other hand, accepting these accounts at face value without critical analysis can lead to a distorted understanding of the past. It's important to approach such narratives with a healthy dose of skepticism, acknowledging the possibility of exaggeration and the influence of cultural biases. The story of the twice-struck bell serves as a reminder of the challenges historians face in reconstructing the past. It highlights the importance of scrutinizing sources, considering multiple perspectives, and acknowledging the limits of our knowledge. In the end, perhaps the true value of these stories lies not in their literal truth, but in the questions they raise about the nature of history, memory, and belief. They remind us that the past is not a fixed, immutable entity, but rather a constantly evolving narrative, shaped by the perspectives and interpretations of those who tell its stories. And sometimes, those stories, however improbable, can offer a more profound understanding of a time and place than the most meticulously documented historical records. So while we may never know the definitive truth behind the twice-struck bell, the story continues to resonate, a testament to the enduring power of myth, legend, and the human fascination with the unexplained. The air in the village of Hanul hung thick and heavy, heavier even than the persistent drizzle that followed the second lightning strike. A suffocating blanket of despair had settled over the thatched roofs and muddy paths, clinging to the villagers like the damp chill in their bones. The vibrant energy that had characterized Hanul, even in the face of hardship, had been snuffed out, replaced by a hollow quiet, punctuated only by the occasional sigh or muttered prayer. The laughter of children was gone, replaced by a fearful whimpering that echoed the anxieties of their parents. What else could they do? When the heavens themselves seemed to have declared war on their small community, how could they fight back? Some of the village elders, huddled together near the scorched remnants of the communal well, beat their breasts and lamented their collective sins. They spoke of forgotten rituals, of disrespectful whispers against the mountain spirits, of offerings deemed insufficient. Had they angered the gods? Had their piety waned, inviting this celestial retribution? Others, more pragmatic but no less distressed, cursed their own short-sightedness for not investing in better lightning rods, a newfangled invention they had dismissed as unnecessary extravagance. Now, as they surveyed the damage, the cost of such foresight seemed a pittance compared to the price they were paying. The second strike, so soon after the first, was seen as an undeniable omen, a sign that Hanul was cursed, doomed to be erased from the earth. Park, the village wine brewer, stood amidst the charred wreckage of his cellar, the acrid smell of burnt rice and wood stinging his nostrils. His face, normally ruddy and cheerful, was ashen, etched with lines of disbelief and profound loss. The lightning, with cruel precision, had ignited his most prized batch of Makgeolli, a potent brew he had been aging for the upcoming harvest festival. Months of meticulous work of carefully nurtured fermentation had vanished in a flash of blinding light and a deafening roar. He stared at the empty space where his oak barrels had stood, the heart of his livelihood reduced to ashes. He ran a calloused hand over his shaved head, a gesture of bewildered frustration. He had always prided himself on his resilience, his ability to bounce back from setbacks, but this felt different. This felt like the universe was telling him to give up, to find another trade, another village, another life, because when it rains, it pours, and in Hanul, it was a torrential downpour. The weight of these repeated misfortunes pressed down on the villagers, crushing their spirits. This wasn't simply a matter of rebuilding damaged structures. It was a battle against the creeping tendrils of despair that threatened to consume them all. History was replete with instances of Joseon communities succumbing to such demoralization in the face of natural disasters and repeated hardship. Villages, once vibrant and bustling, were abandoned, their inhabitants scattering to the winds, seeking refuge in the anonymity of larger towns, or the illusory promise of a fresh start in a new, hopefully less cursed location. Some villagers, whispering in hushed tones, spoke of the legend of the wandering village, a community said to have been driven from their ancestral lands by a series of inexplicable calamities. They wandered the peninsula for generations, forever searching for a place where the heavens wouldn't turn against them. The story, once dismissed as a fanciful tale to frighten children, now held a chilling resonance. Was Hanul destined to become another wandering village, its people forever marked by the scars of misfortune? This phenomenon of abandoning one's home, one's entire life, in the wake of disaster wasn't uncommon in Joseon. The reasons were complex, a tangled web of superstition, economic desperation, and the simple human desire to escape the shadow of trauma. Sometimes, moving on, leaving the ghosts of the past behind, was the only way to survive, to find a semblance of peace. The question of how significantly these migrations were influenced by natural disasters and social unrest is still debated among scholars. Some argue that these events were the primary drivers, forcing people to flee their homes in search of safety and stability. Others contend that while natural disasters and unrest certainly played a role, they were often intertwined with other factors, such as economic hardship, land disputes, and shifting political landscapes. Untangling these threads, separating cause and effect, is a challenging task, made even more difficult by the limited historical records available for many of these communities. Did these desperate souls leave because the heavens frowned upon them, or were they simply seeking better opportunities elsewhere? Was it fate or free will? The answer, like the whispers in the windswept streets of Hanul, remained elusive, lost somewhere between the realms of history and myth. The only certainty was the palpable despair that hung over the village, a testament to the devastating power of misfortune, both real and perceived. The dust swirled around the edges of the village, mirroring the turmoil in the hearts of its inhabitants. Their faces, etched with worry lines deeper than the cracks in the bell, reflected the bleakness of their situation. The harvest had failed, sickness lingered in the air like a shroud, and the bell, their symbol of hope and unity, was now twice broken, a mocking reminder of their misfortunes. Just as despair threatened to consume them entirely, a figure emerged from the swirling dust, a splash of saffron against the muted landscape. A traveling monk, his weathered face etched with kindness, his eyes holding the depth of quiet wisdom, entered the village. His name was Seong, and he carried with him the serenity of the mountains and the compassion of 1,000 whispered prayers. He moved with an unhurried grace, his presence a balm to the frayed nerves of the villagers. Drawn to his aura of tranquility, they gathered around him, their woes spilling forth like a torrent unleashed. They spoke of the blighted crops, the relentless fever, the ominous silence of their twice-cracked bell, their voices thick with despair. Seong listened patiently, his gaze steady and compassionate. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes. He simply listened, acknowledging their pain, validating their fears. When the last villager had spoken, a heavy silence descended, broken only by the rustling of the wind through the barren fields. Then Seong spoke, his voice soft yet resonant, carrying the weight of experience and the lightness of hope. "You see only despair in your broken bell," he began, his gaze sweeping over the dejected faces. "But I see resilience. The bell has been tested, not once, but twice. It is cracked, yes, but it has not shattered. It still stands, a testament to its strength, a symbol of your own enduring spirit." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Even in chaos," he continued, "there is opportunity. The cracks in your bell, like the scars on a warrior, tell a story of survival. They are a reminder that you have faced adversity and endured. They are a symbol not of an ending, but of a new beginning." He reminded them of the resilience of nature, how even after the harshest winter, spring inevitably returns. He spoke of the power of community, how shared burdens become lighter, how collective strength could rebuild what was broken. He didn't offer magical solutions or empty promises. He offered perspective, a different way of seeing their predicament. "The cracks in your bell," Seong reiterated, his eyes twinkling, "do not silence its voice. They simply change its song. Listen closely and you will hear a new melody, a melody of resilience, of hope, of a community forged in the fires of adversity." Seong stayed in the village for several days, his presence a beacon of hope in their time of despair. He shared what little food he had, offered comfort to the sick, and helped the villagers to begin the arduous task of rebuilding. He was, after all, a Buddhist monk, and during the Joseon dynasty, monks often served as spiritual guides and offered support to communities in need. They were often the bedrock of village life, offering solace in times of hardship and celebrating alongside the people during festivals and joyous occasions. Seong, like many monks of his time, was not just a spiritual advisor. He possessed a surprising depth of practical knowledge. He showed the villagers how to fortify their homes against the harsh weather, taught them new methods of farming that might yield better results in the depleted soil, and even shared some basic medicinal practices using herbs and plants found in the surrounding hills. It wasn't uncommon for monks to be skilled in such practical arts. Some were adept at medicine, having studied ancient texts and learned the healing properties of nature. Others were skilled craftsmen, architects, or even martial artists. These skills, often acquired during their monastic training, allowed them to serve their communities in a variety of ways. While Seong worked alongside the villagers, he also shared stories and teachings, subtly weaving in the principles of Buddhist philosophy. He spoke of the impermanence of all things, the importance of finding peace within oneself, and the power of compassion. His words resonated deeply with the villagers, offering a sense of solace and direction amidst their uncertainty. The influence of Buddhist philosophy on Joseon society is a topic of ongoing debate among scholars. While Confucianism held the dominant position in the social and political spheres, Buddhism continued to hold a significant place in the hearts and minds of the people. The extent to which Buddhist practices and beliefs shaped social and political life during this period remains a complex and fascinating area of study. Some argue that Buddhism's emphasis on compassion and social harmony influenced government policies, while others maintain that its impact was primarily confined to the spiritual realm. The historical record paints a complex picture, with evidence suggesting both subtle and overt influences of Buddhist thought on various aspects of Joseon society. Seong's presence in the village was a tangible example of the role that monks often played in supporting their communities. He didn't just offer spiritual guidance. He offered practical help, hope, and a renewed sense of purpose. The twice-cracked bell, once a symbol of despair, began to take on a new meaning. It was a reminder of their hardships, yes, but also of their resilience, their ability to endure, and their capacity to rebuild. The cracks, once seen as flaws, became symbols of strength, each one a testament to the village's enduring spirit. And, as the villagers worked together to rebuild their lives, the sound of the twice-cracked bell, though different, rang out once more, a melody of hope echoing through the valley. Seong's words, like embers catching on dry tinder, ignited something within us. His quiet strength, the way he framed our repeated misfortune not as a curse, but as a testament to our endurance, it was contagious. We'd rebuild the bell. Again. Because apparently, communal projects were therapeutic. And honestly, we needed some therapy. The air in the forge buzzed with a different energy this time. It wasn't the frantic, desperate energy of the first rebuild, nor the resigned weariness of the second. This time, there was a hum of determination, a shared understanding that we weren't just pouring bronze, we were casting our defiance. Each swing of the hammer, each shovelful of coal, each carefully measured ingredient, felt imbued with a new significance. We decided on an inscription. Seong, surprisingly, wasn't the one who suggested it. Old Mrs. Choi, who usually communicated primarily through disapproving clucks and pointed glares, piped up in a surprisingly clear voice. Twice broken, thrice strong. The words hung in the air, stark and simple, yet resonating with the collective feeling in the forge. It was perfect. The molten metal flowed like liquid gold, filling the mold, carrying with it the hopes and frustrations of our little village. As the bell cooled, we etched the inscription, each character a testament to our stubborn refusal to give up. Twice broken, thrice strong. A simple phrase, yet it embodied the spirit of our village, our resilience in the face of repeated adversity. The night the new bell was hung was almost celebratory. The air crackled with anticipation. The first peal echoed through the valley, clear and strong, resonating with a depth that the previous bells had lacked. This wasn't just a sound. It was a declaration, a resounding, "Take that, lightning!" As the sound faded, a sense of peace settled over the village. We'd done it. We'd faced the storm and emerged, not unscathed but unbroken. A warmth spread through me, a feeling of accomplishment, of shared triumph. The warmth lasted for all of 5 minutes. That's when it hit me. The inscription, twice broken, thrice strong. What had seemed so profound in the forge now sounded, well, it sounded like it needed explaining. And I knew, with the sinking certainty that accompanies every good deed in this village, that I was going to be the one doing the explaining. Because, as we all know, no good deed goes unpunished. Part 3. The next morning, as predicted, the questions began. The first visitor, a merchant from a neighboring town, squinted at the inscription. "Twice broken?" he questioned, tilting his head. Did someone drop it?" And so it began. My days were now filled not only with my usual duties, but also with narrating the saga of our lightning-prone bell. I explained to curious travelers, visiting dignitaries, and even a wandering monk about the peculiar weather patterns of our valley and our unwavering commitment to bell ringing. Each time, I'd recite the story, embellishing it a little more with every telling. The lightning strike became more dramatic, the villagers' efforts more heroic, the inscription more profound. "You see," I'd explain, gesturing dramatically towards the bell, "the inscription isn't just about the bell. It's a metaphor. It's about life, about how we are all broken at times, but it's how we rise from those broken pieces that truly defines us." I even started throwing in some philosophical musings about the cyclical nature of destruction and creation. It turns out inscribing things on bells was a pretty common practice back then. Bells weren't just noisemakers. They were important cultural artifacts. Their inscriptions often carried symbolic meaning, commemorating specific events, honoring deities, or even recording the names of the craftsmen who created them. Some bells, I learned, were even inscribed with prayers or wishes, because who doesn't love a good wish, especially one cast in bronze and rung really loud? The whole inscription thing also got me thinking about literacy in Joseon times. Scholars apparently debate this quite a bit. How widespread was the ability to read and write? Who had access to written materials? Was it just the elite? Or did everyday villagers like us have some level of literacy? It made me wonder about the people who had cast and inscribed our previous bells. What were their stories? What messages did they hope to convey? Our twice-broken, thrice-strong bell, however, wasn't just a historical artifact. It was a living testament to our community's spirit. It rang out every day, its tone no longer carrying a note of despair, but a clear, resonant song of hope and resilience. And every time I heard it, I couldn't help but smile, despite the constant explanations I had to give. After all, who knew explaining the quirky details of a lightning-struck bell could be such a bonding experience? It became our village's story, our shared narrative of perseverance. And perhaps that was the most potent magic of the bell all along. Not warding off lightning, but weaving us together, stronger than ever before. The air, once thick with the smell of smoke and despair, now carried the scent of pine wood and damp earth, a fragrance of renewal. Hammer blows echoed through the valley, a rhythmic heartbeat signaling the slow, steady return of life. Roofs were patched, walls rebuilt, not with the same pristine timber as before, but with salvaged wood, scarred and weathered, each plank a testament to the fire's fury and the villagers' resolve. Resilience, it seemed, was as contagious as the misfortune that had preceded it. Faces, etched with grief just weeks ago, now held a flicker of hope, a spark ignited by the shared effort of rebuilding. Children's laughter, once a rare and fragile sound, now drifted on the breeze, carried along with the smoke from newly kindled hearths. Park, the wine brewer, had been amongst the hardest hit. His cellar, once a treasure trove of fermenting goodness, had been reduced to a charred husk. Yet, with a stubborn glint in his eye and a renewed vigor in his step, he'd set to work, clearing the debris, his calloused hands carefully salvaging what he could. Now, the air around his rebuilt cellar, smaller but no less significant, held the sweet, yeasty aroma of a new Makgeolli batch. He swore this one would be his best yet, infused with a touch of the village's indomitable spirit, and perhaps, just perhaps, a little less lightning this time. The stepping-stone path, once slick with rain and ash, was dry and warm beneath my feet. The river, which had raged and roared during the storm, now flowed with a steady, soothing murmur, its waters reflecting the clear blue sky. Each carefully placed step felt like a small victory, a reaffirmation of the village's, and my own, resilience. With each ripple of the water, the reflection of the recast bells shimmered, a constant, gentle reminder. Its deep, resonant tone, which now called villagers to communal meals rather than to emergencies, was a testament to the cyclical nature of life, a sonic embodiment of the idea that even after multiple setbacks, life, stubbornly, beautifully, goes on. Community resilience and renewal were not mere happenstance in Joseon culture. They were central themes woven into the very fabric of society. Art from the era often depicted scenes of villagers rebuilding after floods, droughts, or fires, showcasing not just the devastation, but the unwavering spirit of the people in the face of adversity. Paintings and woodblock prints often highlighted collaborative efforts, hands working together to raise a new beam, or shoulders supporting one another as they cleared debris. These artistic representations served as both a record of historical events and a powerful affirmation of communal strength, a visual reminder that together they could overcome any challenge. Even the intricate patterns woven into everyday textiles often incorporated symbols of resilience, such as the bamboo, which bends but does not break, or the crane, a symbol of longevity and perseverance. Some villages even held festivals or celebrations after overcoming misfortunes, a quirky and symbolic way of reaffirming communal strength. These weren't celebrations of the misfortune itself, but rather a joyous recognition of their collective ability to endure and rebuild. Imagine the vibrant colors, the rhythmic drumming, the shared meals, all serving as a powerful catharsis, a way to release the pent-up tension and anxiety, and to usher in a new beginning. These festivals were a testament to the human spirit's capacity for joy, even in the aftermath of hardship, a way of thumbing their noses at fate and declaring their unwavering resolve to move forward, stronger and more united than before. They understood, perhaps better than we do today, that true strength lies not in avoiding hardship, but in facing it head-on, together. The factors that contributed to the resilience and longevity of Joseon communities are still debated by historians. Was it their deep-rooted Confucian values which emphasized social harmony and mutual support? Or was it the strong sense of community identity forged through shared experiences and traditions? Perhaps it was the pragmatic understanding of the cyclical nature of life, the acceptance that hardship was inevitable, and renewal, though never guaranteed, was always possible. Some scholars point to the influence of Buddhism, with its emphasis on impermanence and the acceptance of suffering, as a key factor in shaping the Joseon people's ability to endure. Others argue that the very geography of the Korean peninsula, with its volatile weather patterns and challenging terrain, played a crucial role in fostering a culture of resilience. Whatever the specific reasons, the resilience of these communities stands as a powerful example of the human spirit's ability to not only survive, but to thrive, even in the face of overwhelming odds. As I continued along the stepping stone path, the sun warm on my face, the sound of the river in my ears, and the scent of new life in the air, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of hope. The village, scarred but not broken, was a living testament to the enduring power of human resilience, a reminder that even after the fiercest storm, the sun will eventually break through the clouds. The stepping stones, slick with moss and the spray of the nearby stream, finally leveled out onto a wider, grassy bank. I stretched, feeling the satisfying pop and crackle of weary muscles, and took a deep breath of the crisp mountain air. Just as I was reaching for my pack, I noticed movement further down the path. A small group of travelers, maybe 5 or 6 in total, were making their way towards me, their shoulders slumped with fatigue, but their eyes bright with a certain determined hope. I recognized the look. It was the same look I'd seen in my own reflection just a few hours earlier. The look of someone on a journey, searching for something just beyond the next bend in the path. I smiled, feeling a sudden kinship with these strangers, and reached into my pack. Park's Makgeolli, the perfect remedy for weary travelers. "Greetings," I called out, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet valley. "Would you care for a taste of something refreshing?" They approached cautiously at first, their expressions wary. But as I poured the milky, slightly effervescent liquid into small wooden cups, their apprehension seemed to melt away, replaced by curiosity and gratitude. "Thank you," one of them, a woman with kind eyes and lines etched around her mouth, said. "This is most welcome." As they sipped the Makgeolli, I told them the story of the twice-cracked bell. I described the bell's creation, the pride of the artisans, the resounding first ring, and then the devastating crack. I spoke of the attempts to recast it, the second failure, and finally, the acceptance of its imperfections, the realization that its unique sound was a testament to its resilience. They listened intently, their faces reflecting a shared understanding of the story's meaning. The man with a weathered face and a long, braided beard nodded slowly as I spoke. A younger woman, perhaps his daughter, gazed at the distant mountains, her eyes filled with a thoughtful contemplation. Another traveler, sturdy man with calloused hands, traced patterns in the dirt with a stick, seemingly absorbed in the cyclical nature of creation and destruction that the story represented. When I finished, a comfortable silence settled over us. We sat together, sharing the last of the Makgeolli and the quiet beauty of the mountain landscape. The woman who had first spoken, her voice soft with understanding, said, "The bell, it is like life itself, is it not? Broken and mended, flawed and yet beautiful." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of connection with these fellow travelers. "Indeed," I replied. "It's a reminder that even in brokenness there is beauty, and in imperfection there is strength." After a while, they gathered their belongings, preparing to continue their journey. As they stood to leave, the older man placed a hand on my shoulder. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with genuine warmth, "for the drink and for the story. It is good to be reminded of these things." I watched as they disappeared around the bend in the path, their figures growing smaller against the backdrop of the towering peaks. A sense of peace settled over me. It was strange how sharing a simple story and a cup of Makgeolli could forge such a strong connection with complete strangers. But then again, perhaps it wasn't so strange. Perhaps it was a testament to the shared human experience of journey and resilience, the understanding that we are all, in our own way, navigating the cracks and fissures of life. It struck me that travel and pilgrimage were common practices during the Joseon dynasty. People from all walks of life, from humble farmers to learned scholars, embarked on journeys, often to sacred sites nestled deep within the mountains, or to breathtaking natural landscapes believed to hold spiritual power. These journeys were not just about reaching a destination. They were about the process itself, the challenges overcome, the lessons learned along the way. They were a way of connecting with something larger than oneself, a way of seeking solace, understanding, and perhaps even enlightenment. I imagine these travelers, centuries ago, traversing similar paths, their journeys fueled by the same hopes and fears that drive us today. Some, perhaps, were seeking blessings from the mountain spirits, while others might have been on a quest for healing or a deeper connection with nature. They might have traveled in groups, like the ones I had just encountered, sharing stories and supporting each other through the hardships of the road. I'd read somewhere that some travelers even carried maps or guidebooks, offering practical advice on navigating the treacherous mountain trails, as well as insights into local lore and customs. I pictured these weathered scrolls, filled with handwritten notes and intricate drawings, passed down through generations, serving as both a practical tool and a repository of collective wisdom. They must have been invaluable resources for those venturing into the unknown, offering a sense of security and connection to those who had walked the path before them. The social and cultural significance of travel and pilgrimage in Joseon society is still a subject of debate among scholars. Some argue that these journeys reinforced existing social hierarchies, with pilgrimages to certain sacred sites becoming exclusive rituals reserved for the elite. Others emphasize the democratizing aspect of travel, suggesting that it offered opportunities for social mobility and cultural exchange, allowing people from different backgrounds to interact and share ideas. Still, others focus on the spiritual and psychological dimensions of these journeys, exploring how they shaped individual beliefs and contributed to a shared sense of cultural identity. Regardless of the specific interpretations, it's clear that travel and pilgrimage played a significant role in shaping the social fabric of Joseon society, influencing everything from religious practices to artistic expression and social interactions. The paths carved into these mountains, worn smooth by the footsteps of countless travelers, are a testament to the enduring human need for connection, meaning, and the transformative power of journey. The moon, a silver sickle in the inky sky, continued its slow descent towards the horizon, its light painting long, dancing shadows across the shimmering surface of the river. The bell's song, which had rung out so clearly just moments before, now faded into the stillness of the night, a gentle, almost ethereal reminder of the continuous, unwavering passage of time. A sense of calm, deep and pervasive, settled over me, a tranquil blanket against the lingering chill of the evening. And, if I'm being completely honest, a touch of sleepiness, too, began to tug at the edges of my awareness. My eyelids grew heavy, and a gentle yawn escaped my lips. Those stepping stones, I could almost see them again in my mind's eye, smooth and gray against the rushing water. Each one a decision, a moment of courage, a leap of faith. Each one a testament to the journeys I had undertaken, both the grand adventures and the smaller, more personal odysseys. And the setbacks, those, too, flickered through my memory, not as sharp, stinging reminders of failure, but as softened, blurred images like watercolors left out in the rain. The sharp edges of disappointment and frustration had worn away, leaving behind only the quiet understanding that they, too, were part of the tapestry of my life. They were the shadows that gave depth to the brighter hues of triumph and joy. As sleep gently embraced me, its tendrils soft and welcoming, the world around me began to quiet down. The rustling of leaves in the nearby trees faded into a soft susurrus. The chirping of crickets, so insistent just moments before, became a gentle rhythmic chorus. And the river, oh, the river, its constant murmur transformed into a soothing whisper, a lullaby sung by the ancient stones and the flowing water. Rest well, friend, it seemed to say. Rest well, for tomorrow is another journey. And perhaps, just perhaps, it will be a journey with a little less lightning. I eased into slumber, my body relaxing into the soft earth beneath me. The whispers of the past, once so loud and insistent, demanding to be heard, now faded into the gentle hum of a summer night. The anxieties and uncertainties that had clung to me like burrs on a traveler's cloak finally released their hold, allowing me to drift further and further into the peaceful oblivion of sleep. The cool night air, fragrant with the scent of pine and damp earth, washed over me, a soothing balm to my weary soul. Memories of the day, so vivid and sharp just moments before, began to soften and blend together. The faces of the people I had met, the places I had seen, the challenges I had overcome, they all became part of a dreamlike tapestry, woven together with threads of moonlight and starlight. The vibrant colors of the day slowly gave way to the muted tones of twilight, then to the deep, rich blacks and blues of the night. The river's whisper continued its soothing song, a constant, reassuring presence in the darkness. It spoke of ancient things, of the endless cycle of life and death, of the ebb and flow of time itself. It spoke of resilience and renewal, of the enduring power of nature, and of the quiet strength that lies within each of us. "Rest well, friend," the river whispered again, its voice soft and gentle, yet filled with an ancient wisdom. "Rest well, for tomorrow is another day in Joseon, and who knows what adventures await." The possibilities stretched out before me, endless and unknown, like the vast, star-studded sky above. And as I drifted deeper into sleep, a small, hopeful smile touched my lips. Whatever tomorrow may bring, I would face it with renewed strength and a heart filled with the quiet peace of the river's lullaby. The journey continues, I thought, just before sleep finally claimed me completely. The journey continues.